Welcome to the Leading Sheep webinar series on feral pig control, featuring Jason Wishart from the Invasive Animals CRC. Episode 1 covers the behaviours and impacts of feral pigs.
So today we'll be talking about feral pig management in Australia with a little bit more of a focus on Queensland, I guess. My name's Jason Wishart and I'm a Field Research Officer for the Invasive Animals CRC, and I have been for quite some time now. And yeah, I've been doing plenty of work on feral pigs all over the country. Okay, so feral pigs in Australia, they've been present here since early European settlement. They're initially concentrated around settlement areas, but they've since spread throughout a majority, or almost 40% of the mainland. This is through illegal and accidental translocation. A lot of these have dispersed through and along waterways, and you can see there the map of Australia with some of the heavier infestations being in those sort of west areas. In 1990, Jim Hone estimated there to be between 3.5 and 23 million feral pigs in Australia. So that's a confidence interval estimate. So, the density should fall somewhere in between there. They occupy a wide range of habitats throughout Australia, from the really sort of arid zones, where I've been doing some work currently in central New South Wales, which is sort of mallee climate, through to the alpine and even the wet tropics in North Queensland. But food, water and shelter are key factors to their survival, and the importance of those, I guess, depends on the situation at hand. In a lot of situations, shelter becomes the most important, particularly in really hot conditions, because pigs will travel a long way overnight to access water, up to 10 kilometres in some circumstances. But if they can't escape the heat during the day, they'll die of heat exhaustion quickly. The home range varies according to body size and gender, as well as resource density. So larger pigs, they need more food, so they need to cover more area to gather those resources. Gender, so males have larger home ranges than the females, and that's probably to do with their larger body size, but also because sows have small home ranges, the boars want to, I guess, travel throughout the landscape to service as many of those as possible. Sows have an average of about 6 piglets per year in each litter. Sometimes this can be up as high as 12 piglets, depending on seasonal conditions, and they can also have up to 2 litters per year, which shows how quickly their numbers can jump. The diet of feral pigs, they're an omnivore, but they have a bit of a preference towards green vegetation when it's available. So when after heavy rains, they'll go for the green, actively growing vegetation, which is also high in protein, which is what they require for population recovery. They'll also chase lambs as well during lambing times, and studies have shown that up between 30 and 40% of lambs are taken by feral pigs. They rarely leave any signs at all of predation. Particularly with lambs, you may find a skull or hooves or some wool, but yeah, it's sometimes can be difficult to determine what's actually taking the lambs. But if there's no sign at all, a lot of the time that's pigs. As well, they'll eat roots and bulbs and things, and this normally happens when the active growing grasses begin to hay off. They'll start digging and chasing roots and things like that. They have a lesser quality, so that's why they're sort of a secondary source. The eggs of ground nesting birds as well is an issue, as well as reptiles too. So things like ground nesting turtles, for instance, earthworms and other invertebrates that live under the soil surface. Feral pigs will turn over massive areas in search of food overnight and can cause considerable damage. And then you've got carrion consumption as well, so they'll eat dead lambs, sheep, and I guess cattle and all sorts of things if they can find it, and other food is scarce. So some of the things to look for to determine whether you have feral pigs perhaps on your property if you're new to this. A lot of people already know what signs to look for, but some may not, so I'll just quickly run through it. A lot of the time you'll find regular travel pads. Pigs use the same pad often to go to water or to go to favourite feeding grounds and things like that. So a lot of the time if you find these well-worn pads, you can have a look and you can find droppings On there you can also find tusking and all sorts of things. So the other thing too to look at in drier areas is wallows and tree rubs and tracks around dams and things. So if you come up to a dam, you can walk around the edge and you'll find wallows where pigs will wallow sort of in the warm conditions for thermoregulation, as they don't have sweat glands, so they need to cool off. But they also wallow to relieve parasite infection as well. So you can find wallows in cooler conditions. Day camps, that's where the animals normally camp up during the day to escape the heat, and they'll often use the same one regularly until they're disturbed from that site. So if you can find those, it's a good spot to, I guess, target some control. Dung and ground rooting. Several studies have shown wherever there's fresh dung and fresh ground rooting, the chances of baiting and trapping success increase. Carrion consumption, as I mentioned earlier, we find that some animals start to get consumed relatively quickly by feral pigs, and holes under fences are another one as well. It's quite often. So the pigs will start the damage, but then it's often used by a number of other animals as well. So it can be expensive, and it can also increase the chances of sheep roaming onto next door neighbours' properties and cross-contamination and all those sorts of things. So that brings us to the impacts, I guess, of agriculture. Back in '82, it was estimated that feral pigs cause around $100 million worth of damage. This is probably likely to be much greater in current climates. As mentioned, they'll prey on newborn lambs. They wallow where cattle and sheep and all sorts of things drink, which is a huge disease risk. They damage crops by consuming them and just trampling them, smash through fences, and also wallow in dams. Some of the diseases that are commonly carried by feral pigs in Australia are leptospirosis, also brucellosis, and Q fever. Some of these, well, all of those can be also transmitted to humans, so it's quite a concern. And then you have the environmental impacts, which are a little bit more difficult to quantify, I guess, because you can't, I suppose, put a dollar value on it, and we don't know often how many of these, I guess, endangered species are actually out there and things. But feral pigs have been shown to dig up threatened species in Cape York, the nests of ground nesting sea turtles. So there was a study just recently published, this year actually, that showed that 40% of sea turtle nests were damaged, and that 89% of that damage was caused by feral pigs, which is quite high and quite concerning. And then you've got other things too, like frogs, threatened frogs and ground nesting birds. They'll also, during ground rooting, change the soil layer and composition, which can alter habitat structure. And they often target riparian zones, which is also valuable habitat for many other native species. Because of the environmental damages, feral pigs have been listed as a key threatening process to their survival under the Threatened Species Environment Conservation Act, or EPBC Act, sorry. So this is largely by predation, habitat degradation, competition and disease transmission.